If history teaches us anything, it's that half the world's most powerful leaders were taken out by snacks. Welcome to the golden age of edible assassination, the Sumerian death dust. Let's start where death got organized. Ancient Sumer. Around 2100 BCE, in the city of Lagash, priests weren't just busy praying, they were quietly killing. Clay tablets dug up from temple ruins mention something polite-sounding, divine powders. Don't be fooled, these were early poisons. The main suspects? Hellebore and aconite. Plants that look harmless, until your stomach explodes, your heart forgets how to beat, and you start convulsing in front of the gods. Records show these were mixed into bread offerings or wine cups and blessed for targets. It was basically an ancient death smoothie, served with a prayer. Why poison though? Simple. No mess, no blade, no blood. In a world full of superstition, poisons gave power without starting wars. High priests, kings, even rival merchants, if you were a threat, someone could just say the gods were angry with you, and then you'd start vomiting blood. Some historians believe these powders were stored in sealed jars and guarded like gold. There's even a tablet from the time that lists ingredients and dosages next to astrological signs. Translation could be, don't give too much hellebore during a full moon or they'll die too fast. These people had murder calendars. It wasn't just local use either. Some tablets from Ebla and mention smoke powders traded across cities. That's trade-based biochemical warfare, 3,000 years before chemical treaties. And if you're wondering how effective this stuff was, one dose of wild aconite can kill a grown man in under an hour. Hellebore makes your insides burn like fire and shuts down your lungs while you're still awake. Priests called it divine justice. The victims just called it the end. So yes, the world's first writing system included recipes for targeted death. And it wasn't considered evil. It was smart, efficient, holy, even. And somewhere under the sands of Iraq, there's probably still a clay jar of powdered death waiting for the wrong archaeologist to open it. Egyptian eye paint or death trap? Queen Ta looked flawless. The eyeliner was thick, charcoal black, perfectly winged. But here's what her court didn't see. The powdered glamour smeared across her lids wasn't just for style, it was loaded with galena, stibnite, and sometimes even real gar, a nasty arsenic sulfide. The Egyptians worshipped cosmetics. Eye paint was sacred, symbolic, and used by everyone from laborers to royalty. But with no safety labels and no understanding of long-term exposure, that daily glam routine doubled as a slow, glittery execution. In tombs across Thebes and Saqqara, archaeologists found tiny stone jars filled with coal. Tests showed dangerously high levels of lead sulfide, and not just a little, concentrations strong enough to cause nerve damage, kidney failure, and, in high doses, death. This wasn't some one-off mistake. Entire cosmetic workshops were producing industrial levels of this stuff. Artisans ground minerals by hand, day in, day out, and many likely died young from chronic exposure. Elite women, reapplying eyeliner daily, slowly absorbed lead through thin eyelid skin. Even children were painted for protection, unknowingly set on a path toward neurological damage. It wasn't a fashion trend. It was a nationwide biohazard. The irony? They thought it was medicine. The priest-physicians believed lead-based coal-protected eyes from disease and sun glare. Technically, they weren't wrong. The compounds stimulated immune responses and did help kill bacteria. But in royal circles, the paint got thicker, fancier, deadlier. Some sources suggest that court assassins used this belief to their advantage. If a royal rival had an eye infection, servants would grind up a more potent powder, usually laced with arsenic, and apply it right to the skin. Victims would sicken slowly. No bruises, no blade, just a royal who started getting dizzy, weak, and eventually gone. There's no proof Queen Ta was poisoned that way, but scholars have questioned the cause of her son's strange death. Akhenaten, the pharaoh who tried to turn Egypt monotheist. His elongated skull and physical deformities led to speculation about toxic exposure, possibly even inherited. Daily lead exposure passed from mother to child? Wouldn't be the weirdest thing Egypt gave the world. Add in powdered malachite, another copper-heavy favorite, and you've got the perfect death kit, colorful, ritual-approved, and fatal with enough use. The Greek Scythian arrow toxin. Herodotus didn't make this one up. The Scythians, nomadic warriors from the Eurasian steppe, dipped their arrows in a mixture so vile it belonged in a plague lab. First, they'd bury venomous snakes in dung. Then they'd wait. Weeks later, the mess was dug up, mixed with human blood and feces, and stored in sealed horn flasks. Dip your arrow, let it dry, fire away. You didn't have to be accurate. A scratch was enough. The target wouldn't drop instantly. That was the beauty of it. They'd get dizzy, feverish. Then came the swelling, blackened flesh, and pain that never stopped. Gangrene, sepsis, necrosis. Even if the wound wasn't fatal, the infection could be. Greek soldiers had seen battle wounds. This was different. It terrified them. You could survive the arrow, but still die choking on your own infected blood days later. Doctors couldn't fix it. No one could. Soldiers started avoiding Scythian archers, not because of accuracy, but because of the aftermath. This wasn't a random scare tactic. It was methodical. The Scythians used horn containers to keep the mixture fresh. Some sources mention boiling venom down into a paste before burial, making it stick better. This was centuries before germ theory, but they understood cause and effect. Rot kills, disease spreads, panic wins battles. What made it worse was the delay. Some victims felt fine at first. Hours later, they couldn't walk. By morning, their limbs had turned blue. The pain, unrelenting. The smell, worse. Soldiers would beg to have limbs cut off just to stop it from spreading. Most still died. Modern researchers believe the toxins involved triggered septicemia and tetanus, made worse by the anaerobic bacteria found in rotting organic material. In 2011, a forensic pathology review suggested the combination likely included Clostridium perfringens, the same bacteria behind gas gangrene in World War I. It wasn't just ancient brutality, it was a kind of proto-bioengineering. The Scythians didn't need to name bacteria to weaponize them. They just needed the smell to be right, the arrows to stay sharp, and time to let the body rot from the inside out. And that made them one of the most feared enemies on the battlefield, with zero medical understanding and 100% effectiveness. India's Garuda poison in royal meals. The Mauryan Empire didn't just train soldiers, it trained poisoners. In the court of Chandragupta, Maurya, assassinations weren't whispered rumors, they were a career path. Ancient Sanskrit texts like the Arthashastra, written by royal advisor Chanakya, laid it out in detail. There were poison testers, poisoners, anti-poison experts, and most importantly, chefs trained to detect or disguise the stuff. Some later sources refer to a feared blend called Garuda poison, an alleged mix of plant toxins, snake venom, and heavy metals like arsenic or mercury. Whether the name was historical or mythologized later, the effect was the same: silent, fast, and fatal. The Mauryans took it seriously. Royals dined with tasters, but even that wasn't foolproof. Some reports say that once a tester died from poisoned fruit, the king just sat back and ordered something else. Cold, efficient, normal. Chanakya allegedly used it for political cleanup. When Chandragupta took power, rival generals and regional kings mysteriously dropped dead mid-feast. Coincidence? The Arthashastra calls it covert action. Today, we'd call it food-based warfare. One wild detail: it's believed Chanakya once raised a girl on microdoses of poison to create the perfect poison maiden. Anyone who kissed or slept with her died from skin contact. According to legend, she was accidentally sent to marry Chandragupta. When she died during labor, Chanakya cut open her belly and saved the baby. That baby was Bindusara, who ruled next. Historians debate how true that story is. But records show Bindusara's nickname was Amitragata, Slayer of Enemies. Not exactly a cuddly legacy, royal kitchens became battlegrounds. Chefs were taught to detect odd flavors. Tasters were trained to recognize early symptoms: metallic taste, numb lips, sudden dizziness. Still, people dropped dead with full stomachs and empty expressions. For the Mauryans, poison wasn't a last resort. It was a standard menu item, served hot, spiced, and laced with enough venom to make dessert optional. If you got invited to dinner and no one else touched the curry, eat fast, or don't eat at all. The Roman poison ring of Locusta. Rome had senators, temples, and plumbing. It also had Locusta, an empire-funded assassin with a garden full of nightmares. She wasn't a witch, she wasn't a doctor, she was something worse, a professional poisoner, and one of the first to make a full-time career out of murder by plant. In 54 CE, Emperor Claudius dropped dead after eating mushrooms. His doctor said food poisoning. His wife, Agrippina, said tragic accident. Locusta said nothing, because she was the one who brewed the dose. According to Tacitus, Agrippina hired Locusta to remove Claudius, so her son, Nero, could take the throne. The poison allegedly didn't work fast enough, so they followed it up with a feather soaked in more poison. Efficient. After the job, Nero brought Locusta into palace service. She became Rome's go-to for customized toxins: Atropa belladonna for vision distortion, hemlock for paralysis, and cyanide-based almond paste if you wanted to get creative. She tested concoctions on condemned prisoners, tweaking recipes based on how long it took them to collapse. Nero even gave her a farm to grow ingredients and students to pass on the craft. Not a metaphor. He literally gave her a poison school. Her fame spread. Senators whispered her name at dinner. Anyone in her orbit ended up dead, missing, or incredibly nervous. She wasn't subtle. She didn't have to be. Roman law had no specific charge for poisoners, just murder, which you could work around if you had powerful friends. When Nero finally imploded in 68 CE, the Senate cleaned house. Locusta was arrested, dragged through the streets, and executed. But by then, the damage was done. Dozens of aristocrats, enemies, and inconvenient heirs had been removed by her hand or spoon. China's five-pane powder. During the Tang dynasty, mercy wasn't part of the justice system, especially if you crossed the emperor. The worst offenders didn't just die, they got the powder. No trial, no warning. Just a bowl of rice or a cup of tea laced with a cocktail so horrific, it made hanging look merciful. Later sources describe a rumored Tang-era formula combining arsenic, trioxide, wolfsbane, sulfur, powdered glass, and cinnabar. Not subtle. Each ingredient attacked a different system. Nervous, respiratory, circulatory, digestive, and skin. That's 5 types of failure at once. And that's where the name comes from. A poetic label for a poison designed not just to kill, but to dismantle. Victims didn't go quietly. They gasped, clawed at their throats, bled from the eyes, and screamed until their vocal cords quit. If they were lucky, they passed out early. Most didn't. Some took hours to die. It was mostly used on political enemies, dissenters, rebels, disloyal generals, anyone the imperial court wanted erased without leaving a heroic corpse. The powder guaranteed no martyrdom, just horror. The Taiping Yulan, a massive imperial encyclopedia compiled centuries later, doesn't mention the powder by name, but storytellers often call it a weapon for cowards and emperors. Probably the most honest footnote in bureaucratic history. No antidote existed. Physicians trained in Confucian medicine were instructed not to treat anyone who had been dosed. The logic? If the emperor said die, your only job was to die properly. One suspected case was the death of Chancellor Li Linfu, a notorious court manipulator who allegedly fell out of favor with Emperor Xuanzong. Sources say he began convulsing during a banquet and vomited blood into his lap. The imperial scribes called it natural causes. Sure, the powder wasn't stored in dusty vaults. It was kept active. Court alchemists maintained fresh batches, with ingredients rotated seasonally. Not for effectiveness, just tradition. Some believed a winter mixture killed slower, which was sometimes the point. The Islamic assassin Hashashin toxins. You've heard of the Hashashin, the original assassins who gave the word its name. What you probably didn't hear? They used poison as much as daggers. Operating out of Alamut in Persia, the Nizari Ismaili sect ran a centuries-long campaign of precision kills. Everyone feared their blade, but some never saw one coming. Because a poisoned drink, date, or perfume vial could do the job just as cleanly. Medieval Arabic sources like Ibn al-Sabah and al-Juwayni mention poison in connection with silent deaths. Not all victims were stabbed. Some collapsed after meetings. Others fell ill days later. These weren't random events. The Hashashin didn't leave evidence, but left confusion. Their poisons came from the local pharmacy. Opium extracts, nightshade, hemlock, and sometimes venom emulsions. Mixed with honey or wine, the taste was masked. Symptoms weren't immediate. The goal wasn't a choking fit at the table. It was delay. Let the target travel. Let them feel safe. Let them drop dead surrounded by people with no idea what happened. Some accounts suggest hallucinogens were used, not to kill, but to disorient. One account describes a political target who began sweating, hallucinating, then walking straight off a rooftop. No stab wounds, just a really confused corpse. Unlike most empires, the Hashashin didn't have armies. They had messengers, disguises, and chemistry. Their missions were one-on-one. Every tool had to work perfectly. Poison allowed them to bypass guards, gates, and time. You could send someone to dinner with a pouch of dates and get a regime change before morning. They weren't sloppy. If a poison failed, it was revised. Reagents were stored in mountain strongholds and tested on animals or prisoners, depending on the source. No one escaped the effects. Not caliphs, not generals, not even other sect leaders. One famous case was Nizam al-Mulk, vizier to the Seljuk Empire. Officially, he was stabbed in 1092. Unofficially, some chroniclers suggest he had already been poisoned and the knife was just cleanup. Classic Hashashin move, never trust the obvious cause of death. The Mongol siege poison strategy. Baghdad didn't fall quietly, it choked. In 1258, the Mongols, led by Hulagu Khan, surrounded the Abbasid capital with over 100,000 troops and one very grim playbook. The siege itself was brutal. Catapults, towers, and rivers rerouted to drown the city. But what made it unforgettable was the poison work behind the walls. They started with diseased corpses. Launched by trebuchet, they slammed into rooftops and markets, leaking plague, dysentery, and whatever else had brewed inside. Next came the soaked textiles. Cloth steeped in arsenic, feces, or rotting animal guts, hurled over walls or stuffed into the city's water supply. Medieval chroniclers like Atta Malik Juvayni noted how quickly the city began to rot. People weren't just being stabbed, but were bleeding from the gums, vomiting black fluid, and dying without a single wound. This wasn't random sickness. It was targeted chaos. Mongol scouts mapped out aqueducts. Poisoned carcasses were floated downstream. In some reports, infected cattle were mutilated and left near water storage sites. By the time people got thirsty, the wells were weapons. You didn't have to storm the walls if everyone inside was too sick to hold a sword. Symptoms lined up with ricin-like effects, internal bleeding, rapid organ failure, high fever. Others showed signs of botulism, likely from contaminated meat or stagnant water. Either way, it was death by the gallon. The Mongols weren't scientists, but they were quick learners. They watched what worked and scaled it up. It's likely they saw earlier tactics used in China, where corpses were used in rivers during sieges, and refined them into something even more disgusting. By the time Baghdad fell, the population had dropped from over 1 million to somewhere under 200,000. Many were executed, many starved, but thousands? Poisoned slowly, invisibly, and without any soldier needing to climb a wall. The Mongols didn't just kill armies. They broke ecosystems. Trade, water, air, everything became a delivery system. And when they rode into the city, they didn't thank their archers. They probably thanked their corpse pile. The only upside? Nobody wanted to touch anything afterward. Even looters knew when to wear gloves. The Medici powder room. Florence had art, wealth, and poison. The Medici family brought all three to the table, sometimes literally. By the 1500s, the Medici were more than bankers. They were political architects with enemies in every room. To keep ahead, they didn't just throw balls and paint ceilings, but quietly erased rivals with white arsenic. Cheap, odorless, and almost impossible to trace, arsenic was the Renaissance favorite for people who preferred silence over spectacle. Inside Palazzo Pitti, rumors swirled about a hidden room where cosmetics, tonics, and toxins were prepared side by side. Court apothecaries had dual roles. One day they'd mix perfume, the next they'd prep a fatal cordial. The same glass bottle could kill or cure depending on what label you slapped on it. The poison of choice? Arsenic trioxide, often disguised in sugar or milk, sometimes powdered into makeup. In small doses, it made people sick. Long-term exposure gave them skin lesions, organ failure, and a polite death in bed. A larger dose dropped you in hours. One courtier called it the white wind. You never saw it coming. The Medici didn't do their own dirty work. They had servants, cupbearers, and food tasters who, if loyal, lived to serve again. If not, well, they usually just died first. Records don't confirm every poisoning, but historians agree the list is long. Suspected and rumored victims include Cardinal Giovanni Salviati, who collapsed mid-dinner, and Isabella de' Medici, who reportedly fell down the stairs. Sure, and just happened to be bleeding internally at the time. The powder room wasn't a secret. It was an open secret. Ambassadors wrote about it. Courtiers warned each other. One Venetian diplomat even packed his own food when visiting Florence. Not paranoid, just experienced. And when Catherine de' Medici left for France, she allegedly took a few vials and recipes with her. The export wasn't just cultural, it was chemical. The poison dossier of Catherine de' Medici. France didn't import poison from Italy. Catherine de' Medici brought it herself. When she married into the French royal family, Catherine didn't just pack gowns and manners. She allegedly arrived with a traveling apothecary, her personal perfumer, and a very small, very lethal collection of vials. Welcome to the French court, now with added arsenic. Catherine ruled as queen consort, then queen mother, during one of France's most violent periods. Religious wars, civil unrest, rival factions, it was chaos. But Catherine preferred things clean. She kept a notebook of poisons, if court rumors are to be believed. Inside, recipes involving cantarella, a blend of arsenic and nightshade, aqua tofana, arsenic, lead, and belladonna, and corrosive sublimate, mercuric chloride. If it could be dissolved into wine or pressed into a cosmetic, she knew how to use it. Allegedly. One diplomat wrote that visiting the Valois court meant eating with your will already written. Poisoning became so common that nobles developed the habit of rotating cups, eating only food they brought themselves, or flat-out fasting at royal events. Suspected victims include Antoine de Bourbon, who died conveniently after turning against the crown, and even Catherine's daughter-in-law Elizabeth of Valois, whose sudden illness was officially natural. But nobody believed that. Catherine's crew included René the Florentine, her perfumer, who prepared both scents and toxins. His shop in Paris sold powders, oils, and tinctures, some for beauty, some for murder. The line was thin. She also had Strozzi cousins in Florence running the same kinds of labs. It's unclear how much poison actually passed through Catherine's hands, but she never denied the allegations and never got caught. Historians still debate whether Catherine was a genius or just really lucky. Either way, enemies died. Slowly, painlessly, quietly. That was the point. A stabbing caused headlines. A fainting spell at a masquerade? Easier to cover up. By the time she died in 1589, Catherine had survived 5 kings and outmaneuvered 3 civil wars. Her notebook, if it ever existed, disappeared.